Morning, this is my Olmec Jaredite, 4 colorless, 2 black mana. I'm going to have to remake this one because there's a typo in the beginning. Now it says Olmec Raiders. So I originally was going back and forth with the name for this. Olmec Raiders is in reference to the Olmec people that went missing in the Yucatan, and then afterwards the Aztecs were there. So my theory for this is that the Olmecs were conscripted, or they were bound by oath to serve the Jaredites to the north in the last battle with Coriantumr and Shiz. Even though they were extremely far south of where I'm telling you that I think the Jaredites were at. So technically they would fall under the jurisdiction of the Jaredites, but I have the land of Moron, which would be the capital city of the Jaredites, not falling until the events of Omni. Omni declares in the book of Omni at the end that they've seen non-stop war, and during the book of Omni, the plates of the Nephites go through several different prophets or kings who have to write a little bit and then pass it on. And all throughout this time in Omni, I do believe that the closing scenes of the Book of Ether are also taking place and playing out. I think in the days of Jacob, who is before Omni, and Enos, who is before Omni, so it goes Jacob, Enos, Omni. So in Jacob, he says that they send out, they try to reclaim the Lamanites, is what they say. So they send out people, he sends out people to try to reclaim the Lamanites, is what they call it. And I think those missionaries were a direct line of Nephi, and that's how we get the names Moroni and Mormon later on. So the direct line of Nephi goes and tries to reclaim the Lamanites, and they weren't able to reclaim them. They report that they just want to fight all the time. And that's because in this time in the Book of Ether, they are going through civil war. To the north, their kings keep rotating in and out. This fits with the Omni description of them always fighting non-stop. And so the civil war amongst themselves is when the Nephites are setting up. The Olmec heads found in the Yucatan have a marker of Haplogroup A, maybe Polynesian, which is interesting because the Yucatan is not out of the range of the Polynesian people. In fact, I have the Jaredites are, in my best guess, more akin to the Polynesian, because I think the brother Jared, when they came out of the Tower of Babel, was of Haplogroup A, and I think Jared, who actually becomes the king, not the brother of Jared, because his sons refuse, but the sons of Jared who don't refuse and become kings are of Haplogroup D, which is more Asian, Japanese, and Haplogroup A traditionally is more African. The Olmec and tribes down in South America are assumed. It's funny because they have to go through the same process of nobody able, like they say that they used to say the Book of Mormon is not following mainstream academia, which it doesn't, and because it declares that they sailed to reach the promised land, or the place where Lehi lands, and the sailing is a big no-no. everyone back at 10, 15 years ago used to say that there was no continental sailing. Yet in South America, there are tribes that are indigenous and native to that area who hold the markers of Haplogroup A, and I think they arrived, well, however they got there, according to their tribes, they've always been there. So they're coming, that their DNA marker makes it seem like they must have sailed to get there, which I find very interesting. So there's a lot of, I think the study of haplogroups has been muddied since the early 2000s, and it's hard to study this topic anymore because it's they've muddied the waters. They have a ton of different haplogroups now, but there used to be primary haplogroups in the early stages, and the idea was that there was 3 main haplogroups that all other haplogroups derive from. So I find that interesting. For this, I have to reprint this as Olmec Jaredites. Gains a -1, -1, and remains in play if it would be removed until 3 or more counters are on them. So once this is in play, if it would ever leave play, it doesn't for counters that are on them. So if it would leave play, let's say you have a card that says remove this card or return it to a target player's hand, it wouldn't go. It would just stay in play, but it would become a 4/4 creature instead. Or if it falls in battle and dies, it would stay in play, and it is now a 4/4 creature. That happens again. It now becomes a 3/3 creature. This is the common way of looking at it. And then it happens again. It becomes a 2/2. And then it would, no, actually, at that time it can leave play because they would reach the 3 or more counters. But they can also gain +1/+1 counters, and that would also work towards this 3. Or any counter at all that would land on this creature would count towards this 3. But the idea is that for a while, it's a 5/5, it's not very high, but it will stay in play. That even if it was quote unquote supposed to be removed from play, it wouldn't, it would just stay there. Wherefore the word of the Lord was fulfilled, which he spake unto me, saying, that inasmuch as they will not hearken unto thy words, they shall be cut off from the presence of the Lord, and behold, they are cut off from his presence. This is in reference to the Lamanites, I think. I can't remember, 15:520. Or anybody, for that matter, that doesn't hearken unto the Lord. So my theory is that these Jaredites, who have been called Lamanites by the Nephites, are not Lamanites at all. They were there before, and they're of the Ether history. So the Book of Ether is their history. And so the Book of Mormon's got it covered. So we got one side where it's saying, oh, they're Lamanites, and this is their story. And the other side says, no, this is their real story. They came out from the Tower of Babel. And they had covenants with God as well. And what the Nephites were dealing with was the people during their stage of not listening to the Lord. And during that stage, they called them their brethren, which is true, but then that carries assumptions that they're Laman and Lemuel's people. So that I don't think is true. I think that's why Moroni corrects the record at the end by adding the Book of Ether. And I think Mosiah knew about this, but they must have been under commandments of the Lord not to say anything or correct this idea about who the Lamanites were, because Mosiah had translated the Book of Ether And I also think Nephi knew, but he didn't correct anybody when they thought they were the Lamanites. I don't know. That's how this theory works. It works as if the prophets knew, but they didn't correct anybody. Sometimes I think they do that today, to where there's a lot of answers out there that the prophets could share with us, but they don't because of where we're at, or because the Lord says don't share. It might have nothing to do with who we are and what we're doing and where we're at. God just says don't share this information yet. That also could be true. I don't know. Now this is in reference to the Jaredites to the north and Norse mythology. I think the Mulekites, as they were fighting against the Jaredites to the north, would have had strange encounters with giants. This guy's really big, so I left it because it's Magic the Gathering. It fits well in Magic the Gathering, but I don't know if this actually was the case like this. We don't have the early records of the Mulekites. So that is kept from us. But I think the early records of the Mulekites would be that the north was going through changes and getting colder, and if it fits Norse mythology, because I think the Jaredites' strange language that Mosiah couldn't understand was taught to them by their women. So the Mulekites, if you listen to some people, have a theory that they crossed the North Atlantic Seaway. If that's the case, they could have picked up Celtic families that would marry into Zedekiah's family, because Mulek is Zedekiah's son, the king of Judah. So the king of Judah's family, as they flee from Judah as the last king of the house of Israel, in that time period, Zedekiah has to go serve in the king's court. Nebuchadnezzar and all of his sons are killed, and they think that they killed the line of David that way because all of Zedekiah's sons are destroyed. But Mulek's story is that he is the son of Zedekiah, and then we don't have any other record about that. So they land, and if my theory is correct, the Jaredites are still in full strength, and this would be just after the time of the serpents that were blocking the passage south. I think the Mulekites must have landed south of the snakes, and I think the Nephites landed south of the snakes, and during that time they were setting up their base in a place where the Jaredites couldn't get to them because of the snakes, which I find interesting. And then later on, as the snakes leave and the Jaredites nation is getting closer and closer to their final battle, I have depictions of giants who would come down and fight people in the land south of them, and they'd be they'd be giants, but they'd also be coming out because of the snow to the north. Every now and then they would come down to the land south, and the Mulekites would fight against them. So this is kind of the art direction for that. So mighty northern giant, 2 colorless, upkeep 2, battle cry. So when this attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+0. And this is a fun scripture. And the mean man shall be brought down, and the mighty man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled. And this is an Isaiah quote, which is very interesting with the brass plates quoting the book of Isaiah. Anyway, there's a lot of weird ideas that I'm mixing and exploring to come up with some of my art designs. The giant mythos of the Jaredites. This guy is way over the size of what they have him. In fact, most Jaredites I think, cap out as the biggest they find around, I think, 18 feet. So this guy doubles that. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.